Hi Mason, hi Theo, hello everybody, it's Nana. Today I thought I'd read this book called The Big Little Book of Happy Sadness by Colin Thompson. The Big Little Book of Happy Sadness. Well, that's interesting. I wonder what this book is about. They look like dog footprints. Random House, Australia. Maybe this is an Australian book. George lived alone with his grandmother and an empty place where his father and mother should have been. George's grandmother was a kind lady, but she was very old. The two of them spent most of their time on different planets. Most Friday afternoons, on his way home from school, in that time before the weekend when lonely people realise just how lonely they are, George visited the dog shelter. He always seemed to end up by the last cage in the last aisle. Even the concrete had given up down there, hidden in the shade of a huge tree where the sun never bothered to go. And the concrete and the cages sat beneath a coat of plants. Verdigers. The last cage was where the last cage was where the dogs that no one wanted went for their final week before their journey to heaven. George felt at home there. In the dark gloom, he found a place where everything seemed lonelier than he was. The last cage was often empty, and any dog that did find itself in there usually hid in the shadows, unseen and unloved. Until one special Friday, George arrived and found a dog sitting at the front of the cage looking at him. George stared at the dog, and the dog stared at George. And they both knew they were seeing reflections of themselves. Sorry about the reflection on the pages. That does look a bit gloomy, doesn't it? They do have nice baskets and things to... Whoa! Look at... Is that a dog? Who illustrated this? It didn't say. Maybe it was Colin Thompson. The dog, like George, was scruffy and sad. Yet, even at the end of the line, he was quietly dignified and seemed to almost accept his fate. Here was a dog George could really identify with. The last dog? The last dog, said George to the lady. Last dog? Yes, the one down the end, said George. Ah, yes, poor thing. It's his final day today, she said. Can I take him? We are talking about the same dog, aren't we? She said. The three-legged one in the last cage. George nodded. Why would you want him? We've got 87 other dogs here. They all have got 4 legs and bright eyes and a coat that doesn't look like it's covered in lard, said the woman. Why not take one of them? No, I want the last dog, said George. He's called Jeremy, said the woman, and you'll have to ask your parents first. We close in an hour. Wow, that is not very much time. What's he going to do? George ran home faster than he'd ever run before, so fast that all the air and words were sucked out of him. Go, George, go! Faster, faster! Dog, dog, Jeremy, was all he could manage. Slow down, said George's grandmother. No time, dog, said George. Well, we'll have to think about this, said the old lady. It's a big decision. You know what they say, a dog isn't just for Christmas, it's for life. But he won't have life tomorrow, said George, finally, and managed to tell her about Jeremy. His grandmother saw the big empty space inside George and got her coat. You go ahead. I'll catch up. These pictures are interesting, aren't they? It's almost like some of them are photographs. You go ahead, she said. I'll catch up. George ran back and caught the office lady, who was getting ready to leave. They waited for George's grandmother together. In his cage, Jeremy waited too. Curled up in his basket, he watched the sky grow dark and closed his eyes. And then his cage door was opened for the last time. But it's not morning yet, thought Jeremy. I didn't even get my last dream. There was a little round boy who looked at him before, and an old lady. They were both smiling at him. And they didn't take him towards the green door that led to the big kennel in the sky. They turned and left and went back to the office. I'm sorry about that reflection. The dog shelter lady gave Jeremy a bright blue collar and lead and a disc with his name on it. They were the first ones he'd ever owned, because no one had ever wanted to take him for a walk before. People don't when you've only got 3 legs. A walk isn't so much a walk as a hobble, followed by a falling over and a getting up and a doing it all over again. After it had taken 5 minutes just to reach the shelter's gate, George picked up Jeremy and he carried him home. It took him 5 minutes to get out. It's getting dark, isn't it? They look so happy. Jeremy had never been indoors before. When George lifted him onto the armchair in front of the fire, Jeremy thought that maybe he had gone through the green door after all and died and gone to heaven. In the next few weeks, Jeremy learnt a whole new vocabulary, full of words like cushion and dinner and cuddle. George's world was filled with words he had heard but never experienced before, like warmth and not being on your own. The one word they both wanted to add was walkies, but they needed one more leg for that. So George and his grandmother decided to do something about it. They would make Jeremy a leg. Oh, it must be so wonderful to not be alone anymore. Wow. Pets are good for that, aren't they? Neither of them were very good at making things, so they started modestly. They mixed up flour and water paste and built a leg out of newspaper. They included the new TV guide, even though it was only Tuesday, which just goes to show you how much they really love Jeremy. I think wheels. Maybe make him some wheels. It's one of the great faults of nature that dogs can't smile, because when Jeremy, I don't know if that's true actually, because when Jeremy ran around the garden on his new leg, he had a grin inside his head as wide as Australia. He ran over the tree, and for the first time in his life, he lifted his leg. Oh, he's doing a wee. Of course, only having 3 legs, he could have done the same thing without having to lift one, but he always got muddled up and lifted the wrong leg and ended up flat on his face and wet with a wet tummy. Not anymore. He looks so happy. There's a hills hoist. Good old Australia. But when his new leg got wet and it collapsed, so George's grandmother baked Jeremy a pastry leg. But Jeremy kept eating it. Finally, George sharpened his penknife and he carved Jeremy a wooden leg, like pirates. When he made a second leg with a wheel on the bottom so they could play football in the park, and a third leg with a slipper on the end for bedtime. Wow. There's bedtime. And there's soccer. What a clever little dude. The empty place inside George didn't seem so empty anymore, and the 3 of them lived happily ever after for a long time. It looks like they're in the circus. Wow. Life does look good, doesn't it? That's it. The end. Well, that was a great book. I didn't really know what it was about because I hadn't read it. But wow, how wonderful to fill that place where his parents should be, so he's not lonely. What a great book. I loved it. The Big Little Book of Happy Sadness. Mm-hmm. Well, love you, miss you heaps. This is such a long book, I better go really quickly. Love you, bye. Kisses from Nana.